Hey guys, thanks for joining. This is a deep dive into Unity Catalog. We've kind of titled this as a practitioner's guide. And the reason being is because part of using Unity Catalog and upgrading to Unity Catalog from your legacy Hive Metastore and the way that you've been doing things prior to Databricks requires a bit of understanding in terms of what are some of the mechanics that are involved. So I'm Zishan Papa, just to level set, and I've got Liren Barakat and Iffy directly with me here to do this presentation. So Liren and Iffy will walk you through some of the details, and I'll start and lean in with a level set on what Unity is. Hopefully you had a chance to attend some of the prior and previous presentations. You saw probably Mate's keynote, some really cool stuff there. So I'll touch on that very briefly, and I'll pass it over to Liren, who will walk you guys through the various parts of practicing or adopting Unity Catalog within your enterprise or organization. All right, just a quick, have to show this slide for all the good reasons. Product safe harbor statement. This is just our general product direction. It's for informational purposes only. Make your purchase decisions based on what we have on the truck. Short answer. Outside of that, some of the agenda items that Iffy and Liren will talk about will be specifically around upgrading users and groups to Unity Catalog. How does identity federation work? What are the different types of roles that are available? How do we upgrade Metastores to Unity Catalog? What are some Metastore topologies? How do we deal with managed and external data sources? And then we'll also talk about upgrading workloads to Unity Catalog. So that includes things like cluster policies and job execution. And then we have a partner coming in, Bosco from Privacera, who's going to talk a little bit about integrating with Unity Catalog, how you can use REST API, and some lessons that they've learned as they built out their connected product piece. So just a real quick recap. So let's start with this beautiful diagram of Unity Catalog and the architecture that is contained therein, right? So there's a few different components to Unity Catalog that are important to remember. So the first is this concept of a Metastore. This is not a Hive Metastore. This is a Unity Catalog Metastore. It is a top-level container for a whole bunch of different things within Unity Catalog, among them being catalogs, tables, views, schemas, ACLs, things like external locations, which are paths or defined paths and credentials that point to cloud storage devices, as well as credentials themselves, right? Like IAM roles or managed identities or service principals if you're living in Azure land. In addition to that, Unity Catalog also brings with it account level user management. So before, your workspaces used to be these little monolithic entities where everything was kind of, I don't know what happened there. Everything was kind of individually configured at the workspace. So things like users and groups would come from SCIM connectors that would be set up at the workspace, and this was very operationally intensive if you wanted to scale up or scale down. So we've changed that paradigm with Unity Catalog. So this all now lives at an account level. In addition to that, all of your data, all of your Metastore catalog information, the ACLs, also live in a common place. And these are some of the big lifts of the Unity Catalog. A lot of advantages in terms of taking on the Unity Catalog architecture. Liren here will start the process of walking you guys through upgrading identity. Liren, if you could.
Hello. So let me get that one going. So hold on. Okay. So what we are going to discuss is, first thing is how to upgrade the identity management in Unity Catalog. The most important thing to understand here is that we're moving from a place where identity is managed on the workspace level to a realm where all your identities are managed in the account level. So if you're a user in the account, in the Databricks account, you will be present in all the workspaces. Not necessarily you will have access to all workspaces, but all workspaces will have access to you as a user. So right now, we generated this new concept of an account. And an account console is the facility that is used to manage the account. And the things that we keep at the account are the billing and usage, the administration, the users, the service principal vis-a-vis SPNs, profiles, or managed identities, and groups. And all the workspaces have access to all the users and groups that are managed by the account, as well as the Metastore. The things that are going to be kept at the workspace level is everything around compute and jobs and everything that has to do with physical compute elements. The next concept that I'm going to discuss is the new concept that we're bringing to the table, which is identity federation. So if now, again, you have to scheme all the users and group to each individual workspace, so if there's a user that has to be on multiple workspaces, we will have to physically bring the user into each one of these workspaces. We're bringing up a new concept, which is identity federation, where the scheme and the synchronization API will work directly at the account. And it will federate the users and groups into each individual workspaces, each one of the individual workspaces. The one exception is the non-ID federated workspaces, which are the legacy workspaces. The legacy workspaces will allow you to keep your existing groups. We're not going to override your existing groups, and you will be able to keep using it for the foreseeable future. But the best practice is to use the ID federated workspaces, scheme the groups into the account, and then leverage them in each one of the existing workspaces. With Unity Catalog, we introduced few new super users, quote unquote super user. So these are the type of users that are present in Unity Catalog or in the new world of Databricks. It's not primarily, it's not just Unity Catalog. So we have account admin. Account admin are the ultimate super users for Databricks. They can create metastores, they can create workspaces, and they can manage users. So these are the roles that account admin will bear. We have Metastores admin. Metastores admins are primarily dealing with data, and they can create catalogs within the Metastore. And then they can delegate access to these catalogs to other users. We have Workspace admin. Again, Workspace admin deal mostly with the physical aspects, and they can create cluster, endpoints, manage users and groups within the workspace, the association of users and groups to the workspace. And they can obviously delegate this access to other users. And finally, we have a default user that on the data side, where a catalog, database, or table owner is the user that creates these elements, and by default, it can assign access to other users. And finally, we have the bottom of the food chain users, which are the account users. It's all the common users for Databricks that can access a workspace if they are assigned to a workspace, and then they can do anything that they have a permission to do. So this is a capability chart, and I wanted to visualize what I just told you. So what you're seeing in the kind of, my wife will kill me, but it's kind of a pink because I don't name colors very well. And the kind of blue, so the kind of pink are the data access or data roles, and the blue is the compute ones, and then there's the mix that are kind of in between. So if you see the account admin, which is the super user, is kind of between because they can create metastores, but they can create workspaces as well. So they can touch the physical aspect or the compute aspect as well as the data aspect. The Metastore admin is strictly data. The workspace admin is strictly compute. The catalog and database or table owner is strictly data. And finally, the account user can access data and compute. And the capabilities are creating Metastore. Creating Metastore can be done strictly by the account admin. Manage user groups, assign groups to workspaces can be done by the account admin and the workspace admin. So I missed that one. The create workspace, assign Metastore to workspaces is, again, the account admin. Create cluster, workflow, delegate access to compute is the account admin, can be done by the account admin on the workspace admin. And finally, create catalog can be done by the Metastore admin. The interesting thing is delegate access to data. Who can manage the data can be done by either the account admin, Metastore admin, or the owner of this data. And finally, access workspaces and data can be done by any of these this type of users. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is give you the roadmap of what you have to do to set up a identity in the world of Unity Catalog. So all Unity Catalog workspaces use identity federation. So right now, when you create a UC-enabled workspace, it will use identity federation, so you will not be able to create groups or scheme groups or user directly to this workspace. The identity account administrators are defined in Azure. You'll have to define these users as contributor in Azure. It's in the documentation, but it's a step that you have to remind yourself to go through. You will have to enable SSO to the account console. So it's another SSO on top of the SSO you currently have with your workspace. And the next thing that you will have to do is identify business group for scheme. So you will have to identify the scope of the scheme that you want to create. And then you have to enable scheme for the account console. So you will have to set up the scheme for the account console. That's a new concept. You will have to set up a service principal for workflow. So vis-a-vis if you use SPN in Azure or profiles in AWS or managed identity in AWS, you will have to set up this. And you will have to assign users and group to the workspace. So you will have to define within the workspace which users, principal, or groups will have access to this particular workspace. Existing relationship will be maintained. So if you have users already in the workspace, they will be kept there. And finally, you have to test that federation works. And I believe this is, keep moving the mouse.
Thanks, Liran. All right, so next up, after we're done with our identity, which is important to get, starting working with UC, we'll talk about upgrading our metastores from Hive to Unity. And we'll start talking about some definitions first, so we're all on the same page. So data is structured typically in tables, right? Collection of data, columns and rows. Then we have schema or database. We use the word interchangeably, and that's a collection of tables, right? And now we've introduced a third level to our namespace, which is a catalog. So a catalog is a collection of schemas or databases. That's our logical representation of our data. And when we talk about our three-level namespace, that's what we're referring to. So catalog.schema.table. The metastore is essentially the physical implementation of the metadata service. So it is created and lives in a region in a cloud. And within it, we define our catalogs. All right, and then when we talk about Unity Catalog, as Zishan mentioned earlier, it's a collection. It's like a centralized security and governance service for your lakehouse. It's not just the metastores, the metadata service, but it's also ACLs, lineage, search, a lot of other functionality. All right, and think of Metastore and UC as a service as kind of like the physical implementation of this functionality. Why did we introduce the catalog and that third level to our namespace? We did because it unlocks a lot of possibilities on how we structure our data. All right, so think of using the catalog for different business and functional needs. For example, you can have different catalogs for your different SDLC environment scopes, like dev or staging or prod. You can have different catalogs for different business units, or you can use catalogs for team sandboxes. Right, so that last example, you can see at the bottom, we can grant usage on a catalog. Right, so the teams don't own the catalog, but they can use it. We can grant usage and create on the schema. And so now they can create tables, they can do whatever they want in that sandbox, but they can't share outside, right? They're kind of like bound in that box. Great example of using the 3-level namespace. And so now, we can delegate ownership and access to all these different functions or groups or needs that we have with the catalog layer, but have a centralized Unity Metastore to do our admin management and definitions. So if we look at the topology with before Unity Catalog with Hive and after. Before Unity Catalog, every workspace had its own Hive Metastore attached to it, right? It was pretty siloed, essentially. Now with Unity Catalog, we have a centralized regional Metastore where every workspace in that region attaches to. So simpler administration of metadata and the capacity to share metadata between workspaces. How do we go from one to the other? As Liran was saying, now in the account console, you simply attach a workspace to Unity, and basically your workspace now becomes a Unity-enabled workspace. That's it. And what you're going to see when you go into a workspace, you'll see Hive Metastore appear as one of many catalogs. It's a pretty simple process. So I mentioned regional Metastore. Why did I say that? Because the Metastore essentially has a physical aspects to it, right? It's deployed in a region in a cloud. There's practical limitations in terms of using it across region or across clouds from latency and cost perspective. So the best practice is to use a Metastore per region per cloud, attach all the workspaces in that region to that Metastore. And for those needs, there's use cases where you need cross-cloud or cross-region data sharing. You can use the Databricks to Databricks delta sharing. And there's a number of sessions here this week that talk about delta sharing to learn more. All right, so we upgraded our Metastore. Now let's talk about the actual tables. And we have managed and external tables in Databricks. What's the difference? Managed tables are the ones where the Metastore basically manages the actual location where the data lives. There's like a dedicated bucket or storage that it manages. External are the ones where we can choose a random S3 or ADLS or GCP location for our data. What does it practically mean? Why do we care about the difference? The managed tables are more like what you are used to from a traditional database. So you just have to worry about creating tables, updating, dropping. You don't really worry about where the data lives exactly. So it's much simpler to work with. We can actually do some smart things with our metadata and have optimizations and faster performance when we use managed tables. And also something that you probably, if you've used this stuff, practically, when you drop a table, a managed table, the data gets deleted. Kind of like what happens with a traditional database. The external tables, you specify the location of the data, right? So the metadata, the Metastore doesn't quite control that location, right? It's just an external place where you store data. So it's a little bit more complex. You have to deal with the locations. It's less performant. We can't do smart things there with the metadata. And when you drop a table, it only drops the definition of the table, not the actual data. All right, that's the main difference that most people are aware of. In general, we recommend using managed tables because, as I said, simpler, faster. And you may need to use external tables if you have non-delta data, because today only delta is supported managed tables. Or if you need to read write outside of Databricks, or if you have some security requirements that tell you that you have to have separate buckets for separate things. But in general, try to stick to managed delta tables as much as you can. There's benefits to it. A couple of notes on the object stores that you use for either the managed or the external locations. You want to make sure that you configure them properly so that nothing else can access the data besides the users that you want with your fine-grained permissions to access the data. And that means don't allow other services or users or groups to access it, or don't mount the external locations as DBFS mounts. That's simple, but very insecure. Right? It's kind of like trying to put a big gate, but you allow everybody to walk around it. So how do we upgrade those tables, external and managed? External, they're really easy. There's a wizard that we have introduced. If you go to the Data Explorer tab in Databricks, you can select your Hive tables or schema, click the upgrade button. This wizard will pop up. You select the tables you want to upgrade. You select the namespace where you want to go, and that's it. Essentially, what it does under the scenes is it creates that new metadata on top of your external storage. And of course, you'll probably want to do some testing and everything, make sure that, OK, we're good using our Unity table now. And then you can drop the Hive table. We'll just drop the definition in Hive. There's also the sync command that we're introducing. This is coming soon. It's not quite there, but it's coming very soon. Basically, it keeps synchronized your Hive table definition with your Unity Catalog table definition. And that can be very handy in case you have a mixed kind of advanced workload where some jobs are writing data, others are reading, right? And as you kind of start adopting UC, you can't test everything at once, right? You're going to have like a gradual adoption. So if metadata gets updated in the table in Hive, you want it to reflect in Unity, the sync will just automatically do it for you. And what about managed? So our wizard doesn't support managed yet, but it's going to be coming as well. For now, if you have Delta tables, simply use the clone command from Hive to a Unity location, like the example. If you have non-Delta managed tables, you'll have to use a cdas command and convert to external, like the example right here. All right, create table as, location, select from Hive. And again, when you're done with testing, you can drop the Hive table eventually. Now, the difference again with external tables, with managed tables is the data has to move from the managed location to the new location. So there's a data copy that happens, either to the UC managed bucket or your new external location. Again, when you end up dropping that Hive table eventually, it will drop the original copy. So you're left with the Unity Catalog tables. Just a very quick parenthesis here on external storage locations. Try to be smart about how you structure them, right? It can get really messy in there, how you arrange data. Try to separate user-specific, let's call them directories for simplicity, from shared, and group them in a way that you can have as few credentials as possible to access to control access. So in this example, where we have user folders where each user kind of can do whatever they want in that location, right? And then we have a shared folder where the whole team can collaborate. We can go to our cloud team and ask for one credential, one IAM role, or one service principal that accesses all these locations. And then we can use external locations in Unity Catalog to do our fine-grained permissions on the sublocations, right? So we have this one credentials. Let's say for user one, that user one, a prefix folder there. We create an external location for it. We put the path. We use that one credential that our cloud team created. And then we can grant read files, write files, grant create table appropriately to the users that need it. And similar with the shared directory, the shared location, we just grant it to the group, right, instead of an individual user. The point being is limit the number of credentials and locations that you have to manage as an admin, right? So we can help you kind of think through that structure as well. Wrong button. All right, so that's basically upgrade of metadata, metastores, and groups, and and tables. Right, single metastore per region, delta sharing between them, manage tables, delta tables when possible, use wizard, sync, cdas, clone to upgrade them, and then be smart about securing properly your object stores locations and structure them in a way that it's easier for you to manage. And then quickly on clusters and workloads and jobs. So there's two cluster modes that work with Unity Catalog today. The single user and the, we call it user isolation. Think of it as multi-user, right? The shared cluster mode. The difference is we can only share clusters for SQL and Python. So R and Scala, they have to be single user clusters. So that's why we have two modes. And you can just use cluster policies to make sure that your clusters are properly configured for Unity. And if you look at the cluster policy, there's only a few things really that you need. Databricks runtime above 10. The security mode, it's either single user or user isolation, as you see the example. And then in this example, we've also enabled data lineage. So everybody that uses the cluster, there's lineage. And we've also set Hive Metastore as the default catalog so that all our previous jobs, existing jobs that work with Hive, there's backward compatibility basically, and our jobs continue to work and don't fail. And then for your jobs, you simply use that single user policy and use a service principal to run them. That's basically it. Just be mindful, workspace admins are the ones that can change the ownership and allow service principals to run the job. So as a consequence, they can also assume what the service principal can do. So to Liran's point earlier, just be mindful of who you set as admins and make sure the right people have the right roles. All right, Liran, can you show us real quick, like some people are visual here, how that all looks in practice?
All right, guys. I guess I drew the short stick, so I have to do the demo. And as you know, demos always work perfectly. OK. All right. So why? Oh, OK. So hold on. So can we do that? Setting, display. No, hold on. Settings. Oh, no, the other way around.
Here.
In this way.
There.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now you go.
OK, now mirroring. OK, thanks. Sorry. Yeah. All right. So, OK, so what you're seeing here is the new account console. I don't know how many of you, raise a hand, have seen account console. OK, quite a few. OK, you better. So this is a new facility. As I said, we're moving away from administering everything at the workspace level into the account console. This is the account console. The first thing you can see in the account console is all your workspaces, and you can create a new workspace. Again, access to the account console will be granted to the account admins, and only the account admins. In the future, we may have a more structured access to that, but right now it's the account admin that can access it. The next thing that you're going to see, let's pick up the hold on, it's your demo. Let's pick up the workspace that we're going to use for the demo. And as you see, a few definitions that we have on the workspace, and one of them is the Metastore. The Metastore is the facility that enables Unity Catalog, and the Metastore is shared between multiple workspaces, as Ify mentioned. And what we want to do, the default, and the way you will have to think about it is that for every single cloud, every single region, you'll have a Metastore. So if you have 30, 300, 500 workspaces in a single region, they can potentially share the same Metastore. When I go to the Metastore, there are a few definitions on the Metastore, including the credential that the Metastore will use to access the storage. It will access the storage for the managed tables, and we will get into that in a second. So the next thing that you see is that you see user management. As I said, user management is now working through federation. So here you will see all the users and all the groups that will be available to your workspaces. The next thing I want to show you is on the workspace itself, you can see that this particular workspace is defined with identity federation enabled. that means that you will not have to skim the users over to this workspace. Next thing, we will jump into this workspace. And what I want to show you is I'm jumping over to the SQL view. Some of you already use it. Some of you are more familiar with the data science and engineering pane. This is getting a lot of the new features, so you might as well get accustomed with this view. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the data. So as I said, we have now 3 levels of data notation. So the first one is catalog that you see here. And the cool thing is, as I browse the data, I'm not utilizing compute. It is done serverless. So I don't have to have a running endpoint or a running cluster. So I will jump into one of these, and you see that I have the catalog, the database name, and finally the tables. And this will come handy in a bit. The next thing I want to show you is that I have one that is called Hive Metastore. And this is a very unique catalog. This unique is there for legacy purposes, and it is pointing to the Hive Metastore that you currently have in your workspace. So if you have a built-in, if you use the Databricks Metastore in your workspace, it will show that. If you use Glue or anything that relies on your compute, it will show that. That relies on a compute that runs in your workspace. It's not done serverless. The next thing I want to show you is a few of the views that we have on the Unity Catalog. Okay, so I will show you this particular database that I created, and I will show you one of these tables. So it has multiple tables and multiple views. One thing I think that to add to what Ify, and as an asterisk to what Ify said, is after you migrate all your tables, you have to migrate your views. Remind yourself to pay attention to that, because you have to repoint the views to the new table names, but that's a side note. So here you see the schema. The schema is the metadata. You can see some sample data, like it will go and get some rows of data. That's familiar from the current view. The next thing that is unique is the permission. Here you can grant access. So I can specify a principal or a user that needs to access. Here I will add Zishan, and I will allow Zishan to do select, read-only access on this table, and it will show up here. And you can query that from the SQL as well. The next thing I want to show you is something very unique and new to UC. We add a lineage view. Lineage view has both the interface textual view of all the dependent tables and views. We can see all the notebooks that touch this particular table. We can see the jobs that interact with this table, and we can see dashboard that present data from this table. And we have a lineage chart where you can see a visual representation of the flow of the data. So you see this table is now sliced over to 10 different tables, and these particular tables are then joined together to a third level of table. And this is lineage that is performed on the database, on the table level. And then we have the lineage available on the column level. So if I'm looking at schema, I'm looking at age, for example, and I see the lineage chart, I see that this age column appears on all these targets. The final thing that I'm going to demonstrate it to you is what Ify has discussed earlier. And here I have a Hive Metastore, and this Hive Metastore has two tables. Okay, I will look at one of these tables. I'll look at the details of this table. And you see that this table is an external table that is pointing to this particular location. I'm pointing as if you see where I'm pointing. Okay, hold on. So it's pointing to this particular location. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select these two tables. I can select only one by one. OK, so I will select this table. I will click Upgrade. So as I said, it's on the Hive Metastore.
We got to start the next time.
OK. All right. So we have a minute. So, OK, so I will select the target. So I will select the target database that is on Unity. I'll click Next. I will run the upgrade, and it will upgrade the data over. So that have failed because it's a demo. And finally, I will roll it over to Practitioner that will discuss with you how using REST API gives you access to all the facilities. And OK, you know how to find your video?
Start with this one then.
OK.
OK, thank you. I'm Don Bosco Durai. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Practitioner. At Practitioner, we do centralized access governance. What that really means is we centrally manage the policies for most of the cloud data sources, which includes Databricks, Redshift, Postgres, even S3. So we are based on top of Ranger. So what we have done out here is we have taken the Ranger representation of the policies, and we make API calls into Unity Catalog and translate the policies into it. So once we translate the policies into Unity Catalog, then you can use any of the workspaces, and you can run the query, and the same policy will be applied consistently across all of them, right? To be fast. So in addition to access policy, we also do other things where we extend Unity Catalog. Like Unity Catalog, we can discuss sensitive information, and we can push these tags into Unity Catalog. Then you can have a tag-based policy on it. The other things that we do is we also have centralized auditing. So we pull the audits from Unity Catalog, and we push it into Ranger. So you have one place to see the audit from all the different data sources. So I'm going to do a quick demo. Okay. So while the demo is going on, I'm bringing it up, right? There are a couple of security and compliance policy I'm going to show, right? So if you are in a regulated environment, you want to make sure that you can filter out certain rows dynamically. Let's assume you have a GDPR, so you want to do a dynamic rollover filtering. If you have some privacy compliance policies, then you want to redact users, not to show any personal information.
Yeah, it's not compatible.
Yeah. So.
I don't know.
OK. So I'm going to skip the demo for the time being. So the way we are done out here is you can create the policies in Ranger, which is what we do in Practitioner. Then we take that one and we translate it. The way we do it is we have a single secure view. And in that secure view, we automatically generate based on the policy. So in Ranger, you can create attribute-based access control. So we take that one, we translate into the view. And if you have a masking policy, we will create the appropriate UDF on top of it. So regardless which user is running it, the result that you're going to see is going to be custom to that particular user. So in that way, if let's say Emily was a US-based data analyst, if she's running the query, she can only see the data based on the customer based on US, right? Similarly, if you have a PI data, that will all be also masked. Okay, so I have another session tomorrow. So if you guys are interested, you can see it tomorrow. So
Bosco and I will be on stage tomorrow, and he'll give a much more deep dive of the entire integration that Practitioner has done with Unity Catalog. It's very cool. It's very first class in that sense. And thank you, Bosco.
Thanks, sir.
And thank you, Iffy. Thank you, Larry.